Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Playbook for Performance podcast. I'm your host, Shauna Corden. My mission is to make work fun again by building better leaders. This month we're talking about restoring your integrity, and today we're going to be talking about reuniting forgotten parts of yourself to make yourself whole. Now, you're probably wondering, how does this make work fun again? How does it build better leaders? Well, all of this comes down to our integrity. And again, our integrity is not, in the world of coaching, a moral compass that determines right and wrong. When we're talking about integrity in coaching, we are talking about having your words and actions be consistent and that you're living in accordance to your values. So if your values are to save the planet, but you're hopping all over in your private jet, that may not be consistent and you may feel out of integrity. So when we think about pieces of ourselves that are out of integrity, we're thinking about things splintering off. And it takes a lot more energy for something to travel through space. If it's flaking off, paint's peeling off the side as you're going, it creates a lot more resistance. You don't travel as quickly, all of that. And so as coaches, we're always looking for our clients to be creative, resourceful, and whole. And so whenever we see a blind spot for a client, we want to point out, hey, this doesn't seem consistent with who you say you are. Do we need to change how you're talking about yourself, or do we need to change the behavior? And so sometimes what happens is we get going down a path based on the people we're spending time with, and we start adopting some of the behaviors that they have or some of the phrases that they have, but it's not really in alignment with ourselves. And so we see this incoherence. It might be a little bit like an echo, or it could be complete dissonance. And so today we're going to talk about how to reunite those parts, kind of re-laminate those parts that are splintering, put a coat of shellac on it, and then we'll be good to go for maximum speed. So one of the things that we talked about last week in the podcast was claiming preferences. I asked all of you to take on the challenge to eliminate the phrases of "I don't care" or "whatever you want" when you're asked a question, especially something as simple as "what would you like to do for dinner tonight?" To really name a preference, practice, at the very least, to name what you don't want. We also talked about the activity of claiming an artist date for you and you only, where you do something that feeds your soul. It could be relaxing and reading a book. It could be going out to expose yourself to something that feeds your soul, etc. And how this relates to this week is this idea of what are the threads that you keep coming back to. Laura Berman Fortgang talks about this as golden threads that have come back again and again throughout your life history. So what are the activities, the themes that keep coming back? So for me personally, art has always been a theme in my life. I had an experience in grade school where I had drawn a daffodil for my art project of the calendar months, and I was accused of cheating. I don't know how you cheat when you're drawing, but I remember being just mortified that people thought that, but also totally insulted, like, hey, this is my work. What are you talking about? I went on to graduate in art and art history in college. And so it's something that's near and dear to me, and beauty is one of my needs. So I'm always looking for things that are attractive. It's not okay to just have the stainless steel stapler, but I have the gold stapler. So that's a thread that keeps coming back to me. And so I know that if I'm ignoring it too much, then I can get a little cranky. Cranky is a good word. to describe it. So what we want to do to honor the preferences that we have is to do things that help keep them in the fence. So last week we talked about these boundaries that keep the bad stuff out and the good stuff in. So what are the things that you may be doing that are allowing other people to determine your joy? So one of the things that showed up in Bronnie Ware's book, Regrets of the Dying, was the wish that people had on their deathbed that they wish they had allowed themselves to be happy. So they instead were conforming too much to others' expectations. They were trying to please others. They were afraid of rocking the boat. And also just choosing. It is a choice that we make day after day to be happy. And so as a leader, are you putting too much of an imposition on your employees to behave as you wish? Are you not allowing them enough autonomy? Are you not allowing them to do the work their way that would bring them the most growth, the most learning, the most joy? Are you insisting that things be done your way? Now, I'm not talking about safety. I'm not talking about legal compliance. There are plenty of good reasons that we need to follow the rules when it comes to those things. But we've always done it this way is not a good reason. That just tamps down innovation. It tamps down creativity. And frankly, it's something that a robot can do. If you've programmed it that it's only going to be done that way, why do we need a brain for it? Okay, we need brains to make judgment, to innovate, to improve. So how can we do that? One of the things that you might do is an altar. So altars have a long history that's out there in the world that shows what we worship. Right? Depending on the faith that you're in, you might have a candle, you might have food, you might have images, you might have prayer. It might be the place where you communicate. But can you do that for the things that make you the best version of yourself? You know, it might be a photo of you as a child before you developed any self-conscious behaviors. It might be the time where you really shone. It could be activities that you really enjoy, that really feed you. So I don't necessarily mean a physical altar, but can you create a space that allows you to claim those preferences and keep things front and center? The other way you can do that is to put some scheduling in your calendar that allows you to do those things, those preferences, over and over again. So that might be taking Friday for time to think and any other activities that would support that. So earlier today I was speaking with a client. We were talking about some newfound time in their calendar. And I asked if they were going to be intentional about it. And they rattled off a very concrete schedule first thing in the morning before the rest of the family got up. They knew exactly how they wanted to spend that time. And then once they met with their family, they knew exactly what they wanted to do in that time. So if we're thinking about reclaiming these lost parts of ourselves, what are the things that gave you joy in the past that maybe you've abandoned? Maybe you allowed yourself to be too serious. Maybe you thought that grown-ups don't behave in that way. Maybe you thought your current group of the 5 people you spend the most time with would frown upon that. How can you make room for those things that really determine your joy? Because of course, what is the joy for our other 5 people is not necessarily a joy for ourselves. So taking the time and energy to honor that. So the other thing we want to think about is this concept. My mentor calls it soul retrieval. These little pieces that have been lost or forgotten, maybe abandoned, to bring those pieces back to ourselves. Remember, when we're talking about integrity, we're bringing things back so that we're whole. So is there anything that a piece of you that you feel like has been abandoned that you can bring back? It might be, your sense of humor, but you decided that your new office couldn't tolerate, the full version of you. Could it be the creativity that you applied to things, or color, or something like that, that somehow you changed who you were in order to conform to the group around you? And is there something that you can do to start bringing that back, piece by piece, and reassembling the total and the whole of you? So the field work for this week, because remember, coaching without action is just entertainment, we want you to review some old hobbies. So think about things you did as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult. What were the things that really just gave you the best time, that you came home and you were like, oh, that was so great, I can't wait to do that again? What are some things that you could possibly bring back? Now, it may not be the same version of it. One of the explanations that I like to use for values is that as humans, our values really don't change much. It's just the manifestation of those. So my analogy is, if you were making treasure maps as a kid where X marks the spot and you had to go on this little journey to discover, the gold that was buried, what is the version of that you're doing today? Might be that you comb through antique shops looking for that one amazing piece. Or maybe it's adventure travel. Maybe you are doing the swashbuckling part of that, where you're zip lining and catching your own food for dinner. It could be something like that. But what are some of the old hobbies that you had, that you really enjoyed, that really fed you, that you could enjoy today? So this weekend I had a great opportunity to catch up with a dear friend of mine that lives halfway across the country, and her family. And we sat around and played some games. And it had been an eternity since I played games. And we just had so much fun and laughed about completely silly things, including meat sweats. So for those of you who are Apples to Apples fans, you'll know what this means. Meat sweats. New term for me. But think about those old hobbies. For me, I thought, I want a game night. Doesn't have to be once a week, maybe even once a month, but it sure was fun, and I'd like to do more of that. So, to recap, let's start at the beginning of the podcast here. Today, we're really talking about that idea of reuniting forgotten parts. Think of, a plane that's going through space and it's starting to have pieces peel off or about to peel off. We want to reunite those parts by riveting those back down, putting a good gloss over it so that they definitely don't come apart. But that glue or those rivets to bring back those parts are going to have to be claimed. And you're going to have to figure out how you're going to keep them in the fence. How do you keep those rivets in there? And that might be regular maintenance by an activity, either schedule in your calendar, some sort of altar, and definitely choice. Allowing or choosing those activities again and again, and not letting others determine that, because that's not what is popular in your social group. So review some old hobbies, see what it is that you can reclaim, and make that part of you whole again. So that's all for this week. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you need help, if you have comments, please send us a message at podcast@ShaunaCorden.com. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to feature some of your questions in upcoming podcasts. We are here to serve. So take good care. Bye-bye.